y el cuerpo de las mujeres era un montón de tierra roja.
Dueñas del amaranto.
Y fue herido su signo,
almacenaron su semilla.
sorda del pez.
Dueñas del amaranto almacenaron la semilla, según estaba escrito en su corazón. Si breve era su viaje, ¿por qué acompañar no pudimos su descenso?
Ellas dejan de cantar.
Dueñas del amaranto almacenaron la semilla, según estaba escrito en su corazón. Dueñas del amaranto almacenaron la semilla, según estaba escrito en su corazón.
El velho de tu pecho entende mis lágrimas más que tu corazón.
Cuando la desesperanza había tomado su casa, algo a punto de caer, una gota en su perfección reventó la semilla. Dueñas del amaranto almacenaron.
Bajo el oro de la aurora,
dueñas del
aliviaron
amaranto.
sus entrañas laceradas.
Dueñas del amaranto.
Y sus labios de
dueñas
rocío,
del amaranto.
suspendidos quedaron
Semilla
en los
almacenaron, estaba escrito en su corazón, según estaba escrito.
Oferece al agua un momento de tossir.
Cuando sus manos lavaron el jade, ¿quién las acarició? ¿Quién hizo
Las
oscilar
flores
su falda?
y la primavera se abrieron y nadie escuchó aquel dolor.
cuando sus manos lavaron el jade? ¿Quién las acarició? ¿Quién hizo oscilar su falda de serpientes?
Elas deixam de cantar. Busqué um brilho para rehacer mi voz, el fulgor de los pájaros helados. En medio de mi vacilación, la ventisca solloza.
Si breve era su viaje, ¿por qué acompañar no pudimos su descenso? Dueñas del amaranto, almacenaron su semilla. Dueñas del amaranto almacenaron la semilla, según estaba escrito.
Quando sus manos lavaram el jade, quem las acarició? Quem hizo oscilar su falda de serpientes?
Si breve era su viaje, ¿por qué acompañar no pudimos su descenso?
Bajo el oro de la aurora, aliviaram sus entrañas laceradas, e sus lábios de rocío suspendidos quedaram em los valles. Oferece al agua un momento de tossir.
Cuando la desesperanza había tomado su casa, algo a punto de caer, una gota en su perfección reventó la semilla. Dueñas del amaranto, almacenaron. Dueñas del amaranto, dueñas del amaranto, todos dueñas del amaranto. Semilla almacenaron, estaba escrito en su corazón, según estaba
El
escrito.
velho de tu pecho entende mis lágrimas más que tu corazón.
Si breve era su viaje, ¿por qué acompañar no pudimos su descenso?
Elas deixam de cantar. Elas deixam de cantar. Elas deixam de cantar. Elas deixam de cantar.
Marianne Newman and Words Without Borders for including me again in the Sant Jordi Festival. I'm delighted and thrilled to be a part of this celebration. A couple of years ago, I read from Edgar Keret and Thomas Bernhard. Today, from the aphorisms of Johann Fuster and Franz Kafka. Recently, I said that I had come across a quotation by Mario Praz, author of The Romantic Agony. He wrote, "Aphorisms are like soap bubbles. Some burst in the bud, others rise to the sky, ignite like meteors, with iridescent colors, shine for an instant with dazzling light." Johann Fuster's Book of Aphorism, Final Judgments, elegantly translated by Marianne Newman, are just such soap bubbles, rising and iridescent. And here are a couple of them. It's always useful to have one obsession or another. It serves as a distraction. And here is another aphorism by Johann Fuster. We must know how to reach everything in good time: love, success, misfortune, death. An insignificant acceleration or delay can frustrate your full enjoyment of the event. Now, to complement Joan Fuster's aphorisms, let's turn to Kafka's aphorism in the luminescent translation by Shelley Frisch and the exquisite and necessary edition of the aphorisms of Franz Kafka, edited, introduced, and with a magnificent commentary by Rainer Stach. Aphorism number 3. There are 2 cardinal sins from which all others derive: impatience and laxity. Impatience got them expelled from paradise. Indolence keeps them from returning. Perhaps there is only one cardinal sin: impatience. Impatience got them expelled. Impatience keeps them from returning. Aphorism 59. A stair not deeply hollowed out by footsteps is from its own point of view merely a lackluster assemblage of wood. And in conclusion, aphorism number 5. From a certain point on, there is no returning back. This is a point that needs to be reached.
Hello. I just hung behind me an edition of a wooden sculpture, artist book, conceived, designed, and made by me, Tom Carr, to contain the printed book Jo-Ull, the I. There are 24 poems based on my work by Vicenç Altaió, written over 2 decades. Also behind me are some of the publications where these poems first appeared. The prologue is by Marc Arnal and the English translation by Marialena Carr. It's been published by Poesia Serie Culi, Llibres del Segle. I hope you enjoy this video.
El Jo-Ull és el llibre de poemes que culmina els més de 20 anys de col·laboració entre 2 artistes. L'un que de l'ombra en fa imatge i l'altre que de l'imatge en fa vers. Tom Carr i Vicenç Altaió. Els versos, posats ara de costat, prenen un nou significat fora de la seva gènesi original. Tenen vida pròpia, lectura pròpia, independent, amb un significat i significació ara lliure de l'origen creador. En essència, sempre hi ha l'obra de Carr, però també és una obra de Vicenç Altaió, que, com el seu dia feu Paul Eluard en Joan Miró, capta l'energia de l'obra de l'escultor, però no la seva literalitat.
Ignis et aqua. Tant millor quan el foc esdevingui forma imaginària. El seu nombre és aigua. Si aigua i foc se sumen dins el quadrat màgic, és perquè l'un vol elevar l'altre fins al quadrat. Si els nombres imparells d'aigua i foc fan parella, és perquè en una parella mai fan un nombre sencer. La forma del foc és intranscendent quan l'aigua perd sentit.
This is a poem from the first section of the book, Ignis et Tempus, Aqua et Tempus et Lux. Eight, and is given other names, despite being the only one, but not alone. There is no number without shadow, nor a double without sex. Without a third, two neither come together nor apart. Art expands outward in all directions, and nevertheless lives inside a cube. The center moves from the center in order to be one more and center. In the quintessence of love, fire and water construct the number. Art groans when the number from the earth rises to the sky. There will be no art without enclosing the number within the infinite.
De l'ull. Ja no l'ull de Déu, ni la lupa de la il·lustració, ni el sense ull, ni el no del meta-art, sinó el dibuix de l'ull. Si mirant en fora no es fa endins, enllà. Qui crea el visible de l'invisible, la tipografia alfabètica del poema, la topografia numèrica de l'arquitectura, escultura com a coronació del museu, ull on habiten els ulls.
This poem is from the second section of the book, The Eye. From the constellation. The ripe cherries come to peck on the birds from above. They nosedive into the sea to fish the birds from above. The birds bring down the humans, the gods that inhabit the heavens from above. The artist draws the eye on the museum map, joining the numbers from above. The visitors can see the museum numbers in the intersection from below. Simple, risen numbers, ideal forms in the world of ideas from below. Fallen numbers, pure forms reunited by being named from below. In the separation between artist and viewer, in the border between inside and outside from below. And thus we can say more than those who believe that it cannot be worth more, from below, from above.
El naixement del 3 venint del 2. Si en el 0 ofeguem el res, l'espai en blanc, el no res de més, i busquem, girant-lo ràpid, l'halo al·lucinatori diví, la dadiva de l'art que ens anella enclota en si el principi i la fi. Són cercles en l'oïda i l'ull, la plana manifestació matemàtica d'un mot cop crit a la calma. Però quan un cercle i un altre cercle s'entrecreuen en l'infinit, s'entortolliguen en l'infinit, quan un desdiu el que l'altre diu, a l'oralitat de l'ardor, llavors creixen altres cercles en el si i es constitueix la comunitat de vida. Una comunitat de vida feta de rèpliques, girejant-se, centrant i sortint, capbussant-se, torçant l'espai a fi que l'espai sigui el buit que es fa dins. I així és que creix el buit del sentit, fins a la paraula, que reverbera en un espai fet temps. Són veus les que s'aixequen rodant en el remolí de la història, amunt de la història caiguda avall, i nosaltres som llum i aigua, dues hèlits oposades i tres, fent infinit, el finit, dins, fora.
This comes from the third part of the book, Helix. Continuum. Continuity, yes, but unfolding. How to say palm tree, if not mosquitoes. How to say barnacle, if not worms. How to say flower, if not spiders. How to say stone, if not toads. And link us episode by episode in a story of common expansion, in an originating mother, oh, ignorance. For knowing is which truth? If reality's out there in the spiral, life shall never end.
Hello, everybody. My name is James Hawkey, and I'm really happy to be here taking part in this event for Sant Jordi. And today I am here with my friend Xavier Mas Craviotto, who I'll pass you over to in a minute, to talk about some of his latest work that appears in this collection, llum, subterrània, that recently won the Ausiàs Marc Premi de Poesia. And today we're going to read a few poems from this new collection in both English and Catalan. We're also currently working on translating the collection together. So yes, I will be reading some poems in English, Xavier will be reading the same poems in Catalan, and we'll also ask each other a few questions around the process of writing and translating this work. So I've spoken enough for a bit. I'll pass over to you, Xavier.
So hi everyone, we're very excited to be doing this event and celebrate Sant Jordi this way. I'm very happy as well to be here with you talking about poetry and translation, because we've been working on some poems together, and it's been such an inspiring process and such an inspiring work together. So maybe we could start reading a poem to show what we've been working on. We're gonna read a poem with no title. Some of them don't have a title. Could be called The Crow, because it's about this image of the crow that comes from Ted Hughes. And in Catalan, the poem says: I el corb, amb el bec, va furgant la metàfora morta. Destria els cucs de la carn. S'omple el cos de la sangassa putrefacta i dels coàguls inútils que hi pengen. Picoteja amb la ràbia gastada de qui coneix els cadàvers pam a pam, com les habitacions d'una casa. Espicassa amb la calma exhaurida de qui comprèn els rampells tremabunds de la mort i els abraça. De cop, s'atura i atén, escolta, i l'ombra dels seus ulls imita el pànic que fan els dits de la nit quan deixen caure sobre el món la seva hemorràgia negra. El corb ho sent, el corb ho sap. Sap que molt lluny d'aquí, en la pell magra d'un desert constant, s'hi va obrint una ferida plena de boscos.
And that same poem in English. And the crow, with its beak, jabs at the dead metaphor, sorts the maggots from the meat, fills its body with putrid blood and with the useless clots that droop from it, pecks away with the weary rage of one who knows every inch of corpses, like the rooms of a house, pokes away with the exhausted calm of one who understands the terrifying whims of death and embraces them. Suddenly it stops, attentive, listening, and the shadow of its eyes mimics the panic made by fingers of the night as they let their black blood drip onto the world. The crow feels it. The crow knows it. It knows that far from here, in the meagre skin of a constant desert, a wound is opening up, full of forests. So, after that first poem, I think it's probably time that I ask you a quick question about this collection, about what you're doing. So the work that we're reading from today, llum, subterrània, as I believe I mentioned at the start, was awarded the prestigious Ausiàs Marc Poetry Award. And this has been given to some pretty big names in Catalan poetry over the last half a century or so. So how do you think that this work, that llum, subterrània, builds on, or indeed kind of departs from, previous important works in the field?
Yeah, this is something I actually said when I went to Gandia to receive the award. First of all, the prize is named after one of the most important poets of all time in Catalan literature, Ausiàs Marc. And alongside many authors, he's obviously an essential writer of our foundations for all of us who are writing after him. I've always felt that anyone who wants to write should be familiar with the literary tradition in their language. familiar with everything that has been said, that has been written before you, so you can contribute to this tradition in a significant and meaningful way. And there's also something I really like when I write, engaging in conversation, in a dialogue with this tradition, with all these authors that preceded you. At the end of the day, literature fits literature. It's this autotrophic artifact open to so many options and possibilities. So the Osias Marc Poetry Award is an award I've always followed in the list of winners. They are indispensable and inspiring authors that I look up to, and without whom I wouldn't be able to write the way I write, or maybe I wouldn't even write without them. Authors who have contributed enormously to our tradition from contemporary perspectives and have been pioneering real trailblazers, but who at the same time have never disregarded our tradition. Rather the opposite, they have used this tradition to maybe subvert it or to be innovative. They use the tradition as a base to build something on it. So yeah, I'm talking about authors like Pere Quart, Vicent Andrés Estellés, Antoni Vidal Ferrando, Enric Casasses, Jaume Collmariner, Dolors Miquel. They are so inspiring, and I've always had them as a reference.
Well, thank you. And the one thing that is, you know, maybe you've not quite grasped yet is that that list is now for you no longer a them, but an us, like a we. Like
Yeah.
you are on that list now. So that is.
What am I doing in this?
What are we
list,
doing here? Imposter syndrome writ large.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to the next poem then. So I believe this is another poem we're going to read without a title. And Xavi, I'll pass over to you to read it first in Catalan, and then I'll read the English translation.
Okay, thank you. So in Catalan, the poem says: potser és un gest que al darrer instant es reté d'alliberar-se. Un idioma secret al darrere dels ulls. Un misteri intacte entre els brotons de la llengua. Me l'imagino com el nacre de la perla engaviada en el mol·lusc. Una mena de vertigen recorre el món amb la finor de cordes d'alpa. Una voràgine menuda que s'amaga dins les coses. Una vibració que m'endevina el caprici lent dels ossos. Del sol només en queda la carcassa. Tots els llocs han après a existir sense nosaltres. Faig l'últim pas. La terra ha claudicat, i tancat a les costelles noto el cor, gras i calent, que se'm posa a bategar com una pedra absurda.
Thank you. And in English, the poem reads: maybe it's a gesture that at the last moment holds back, a secret language behind the eyes, an intact mystery between blossoms on our tongue. I imagine it like mother of pearl caged inside the shell. A sort of frenzy spreads through the world as delicately as harp strings, a tiny chaos that hides away inside things, a vibration that reads the slow whims in my bones. Only the carcass of the sun is left. All the places have learned to exist without us. I make the final step. The earth has backed down, and buried in my ribs I feel my heart, big and warm, that starts to beat like an absurd stone.
Thank you, James. The translation you've done is amazing. Thank you so much. I was wondering now, because obviously we've been working on them, and translating is not easy at all. So I was wondering, in the process of translating La llum subterrània, what were the main challenges you had to face? So what's the most difficult, challenging part in your experience when translating from Catalan into English? How was the process when you are in front of a poem in Catalan? What are the steps you follow?
So I think one thing that this might prove to be a benefit here, I'm not sure, but I've not translated poetry before. I've not translated other than like kind of as linguistic exercises when you're kind of learning a language, but I've not translated poetry before. So I don't really have, I'm establishing this process as I go, I think. And I think that this work itself is very much feeding my process, if you like. I didn't really have a process before starting this. And this work, the content of this work and the way that you write and the things that you write about are feeding my process of translation, if you like. So you know, I may in the future translate something completely different and be lost. Do you know what I mean? Because I've not, you know, I believe that I think that this work is informing my translation process. I haven't brought a translation process to the work, and that is either something that could be disastrous or it's something that could benefit us. And I think, you know, I'm able to this maybe unconstrained in certain ways. And I think that there are certain challenging things, but I can't really talk about translating Catalan poetry generally speaking. I can only talk about translating your works in this regard, because this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm building this. And I do think that maybe what the most difficult thing is also the most helpful thing is, we've discussed this personally, your choice of words and the way that you have very specific like vocabulary. I'm not going to say higher line, but higher line, ELE. Like you have this very specific vocabulary that is relatively easy to translate, insofar as these are not, a lot of the more difficult words, if you like, are not that necessarily difficult to translate in that regard, because they only have this kind of quite narrow semantic field. But at the same time, I don't know, I think this is something that I'm discovering now. So at the end of this process, I might look back and say, oh, I can see that I was developing that in that point. Maybe I wouldn't do the same thing twice. But I don't know, I think that this work and other work that we've done together as well, we translated works from a previous collection of yours, Lausia. I think all of that is contributing to my process, and that it's still a very dynamic thing that is in flux. So let's see. Ask me the same question in 10 years and I'll give you a completely different answer. Or maybe not.
Okay, will do. Great. So maybe we could read another poem.
Let's do it.
I'm gonna start with the Catalan version. It has no title either, and it reads: Al cercle precís d'una clariana enmig del bosc hi ha un home, i no sóc jo. Tampoc no són pas meus aquests dos ulls que irreconeixiblement reposen sobre aquestes coses breus. L'ocell, la terra, el món, ni aquestes mans que sense moure's han après a calibrar el prodigi de la llum, el desvari de les ombres, ni aquests peus que mortifiquen amb arrels la terra muda i entregada, la peanya que sosté l'estàtua immòbil d'aquest home que no sóc.
Thank you. And in English, that same poem reads: In the precise circle of a clearing in the middle of the woods, there's a man, and it's not me. Nor are mine these two eyes that unrecognizably rest on these fleeting things, the bird, the earth, the world. Nor these hands that without moving have learned to measure the light feverish, the shadows demented. Nor these feet that torment the silent and yielding earth with roots, the pedestal that supports the motionless statue of this man, who isn't me.
Thank you.
So, one more question for you. The last question before we close with another poem. As we've said already, we're currently in the process of translating llum subterrània into English for a broader audience. So what do you, as a poet, as an author, what do you think that Catalan poetry, Catalan literature has to show the world? Like, what's the most exciting message that Catalan authors and indeed translators can help spread?
It's a difficult question. Not only poetry, but Catalan literature in general, I think, is an incredibly diverse, eclectic literature with lots to offer to the world. It's a literature, I would say, comparable to other literatures in Europe in terms of quality, variety, dynamism, vitality. But at the same time, we mustn't forget that Catalan language is a minoritized language, and I would say that Catalan literature is also minoritized within Spain, because often between Catalan literature and the world, there's this interposition of the Spanish literature or even the Spanish state itself. So sometimes in Spain, I feel that Catalan literature and Galician literature, if you like, or Basque literature, among others, are considered peripheral second-class literatures, when in reality, Catalan literature is now in a very healthy state, I would say, or at least that's my impression. We currently have a very powerful structure in terms of publishing houses, in terms of distributors, libraries, bookshops working as cultural centers, literary awards, and most importantly, there are lots of people writing. Maybe we have more writers than readers, which is a problem. We always joke about it,
Maybe,
but
yeah.
a lot of people are writing now in different styles, different genres, and more, and this is the most important thing, I would say, Catalan literature has become more visible worldwide, has a presence in the world through European awards, through translations. That's why translation is so important to Catalan literature. In fact, today I was reading in the news that the novel Boulder by Eva Baltasar has been shortlisted for the prestigious International Booker Prize, which is huge for Catalan literature. And also when I write, I have this premise in mind, which is that you can be universal from your tiny village. You can talk about universal experiences everyone can identify with from your individual experiences. Literature is about, what human beings have in common, what brings us together, no matter where we're born, no matter where we're from. But of course, Catalan literature has its specificities, and I feel it would be more highly regarded and worldwide considered and valued with the strengths, power, and infrastructures of a consolidated state that is in favor of this literature.
Exactly.
Because then we would be able to, I don't know, we would be able to promote it. We would have more tools and platforms at our disposal to spread it, to let people know what's going on, probably with our own state. Mercè Rodoreda, Josep Pla, Josep Carné would have won the Nobel Prize, I'm quite sure about it, or they would be internationally recognized like other authors such as Virginia Woolf or William Faulkner, for example. So we cannot really dissociate literature from power or politics because everything is politics. So the degree to which literatures are well known and valued worldwide sometimes has more to do with this, with ideologies, with politics, with power, rather than the quality of the works itself. At least that's my impression.
No, I think that makes total sense, and particularly, the fact that what we're doing now is we are translating these works without this intermediary, without this kind of need to, like so often, as you said, the only way that Catalan literature can reach a global audience is via this intermediary of Spanish, and this kind of, it's just refracting through another prism. And I think, we can kind of maybe start to free ourselves from that a little bit. But
because translation is building this bridge directly from Catalan literature to the world. We don't need anyone in between, that's why I think it's so important that all these works are being translated into other languages. This is a way of people getting to know Catalan literature, which, as I said, has lots to offer.
Yes. Fantastic. Well, I think we'll close with one final poem. So I'll hand over to you, Xavi, to read the Catalan version.
Okay, this one's very short. It has a title in the end, Reassignació, with as in brackets, so it can also be resignació, and it reads: Quan no puguis llegir el vol de tots aquests insectes que et bronzeixen a les temples, deixa que hi niïn, que del no entendre'n facin llar, que del no entendre'n facin llar invulnerable, l'arquitectura peregrina que apuntala tots els mots que no tenim.
Thank you. And then in English, the poem is called, as in Catalan, with the same brackets around the AS, so reassignation or resignation. When you can no longer read the flight of all these insects that buzz around your temples, let them nest there, so they make a home from not understanding, so they make an impenetrable home from not understanding, that uncanny architecture that props up all the words that we don't have.
Thank you, James.
Well, thank you, Xavi, and thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for including us as well in this International Sant Jordi Festival. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I think we can say goodbye here. So thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bon Sant Jordi a tothom. Vinc a llegir uns quants poemes per aquesta iniciativa tan bonica. Em dic Anna Gual, soc poeta i escric en català. I com us deia, llegiré uns quants poemes en català que em fan molta il·lusió i seran de diferents llibres. Començarem amb un poema que es diu S'ha de fer forat. Agafo una pala i un rasclet i començo a cavar cap avall, trencant primer les rajoles, esmicolant després el ciment i la terra que el sosté. I totes les pedres que trobo les deso a les butxaques per si tot d'una visc una esllavissada i cal fer un mur i esperar que la cosa es calmi. No vull pensar on arribaré ni quan tardaré, ni si al final hi trobaré algú cavant en sentit contrari. Qui sap si xocaré sense tenir temps per prevenir la col·lisió contra el cap d'algú ple de fang i runa. La veritat, pànic de xocar contra mi, de ser jo la pregunta i la resposta. Commoció. El record d'unes ungles amb escates de llum el tinc present sovint. També porto amb mi un pantà ple d'estrelles, l'ombra d'un bosc sencer cremant, les espurnes d'un toll de lava i una desena de rostres avançant entre la boira a la llum brillant dels llams. En la memòria d'un cec, un raig de sol s'incrusta en un vidre entelat. Aquests poemes eren d'un llibre que es titula Implosions i ara seguiré llegint altres poemes d'aquest llibre que es diu L'ésser solar. Selva interior. Crec que m'he desviat de l'asfalt. Crec que això que em fereix són branques. Sé que no he de posar-me severa, però el bosc s'està espessint i tampoc caldria fer veure que no m'espanta. A les fosques la boira no apareix, a les fosques no ressona quan m'abraço. Palparé les arrels per sentir el camí. Si trobo nèctar i un niu amb larves, potser encara hi ha esperança. Quanta innocència s'amaga entre els arbres que em volen acollir a la fageda. Quanta tardor aplegada als genolls tous d'aquesta natura morta, d'aquest pou, d'aquest mur que diu que es trenca, que s'esquerda per les venes. No em trobaràs quan les coses prenguin el nom de la tristesa. No em trobaràs perquè estaré al revers de les paraules. Us llegiré ara un poema d'aquest llibre que també vaig publicar fa un temps, que es diu Símbol 47. Lector a la gruta. Pobre aquell que repetirà el procés de l'abandó. Pobre aquell per ser-ne l'amo. Si em vaig fullejant els llavis, em llegeixo les entranyes com si fos un profeta amagat rere la porta que m'ha de conduir a l'ànima. Vaig néixer cova. Encara no m'heu entès. I seguint en aquesta celebració literària i també poètica, un poema ara d'aquest llibre que es titula Molsa. Pa i ceba. Les formigues recullen amb pinces el crani de les roses. Us esperem a la porxada on ens balla l'ànima. Tenim un alfabet que ens entreté de la mort. i seguint en aquesta voluntat de compartir-vos poesia i poemes, aquest poema d'un llibre que vaig publicar que es diu Ameba, i aquest llibre anava sobre justament la gestació d'un ésser viu i el postpart, els primers mesos de criança, no? Que no són sempre tan idíl·lics com ens venen. El llibre està partit en dues meitats i aquest poema que ara llegiré es diu Crom i pertany a la primera meitat del llibre. Si la solidesa no existeix, com és que l'esquelet s'aguanta? Si el cervell és tan mal parit, com és que el coll encara el subjecta? Carn, que vol dir descens, que vol dir vèncer les misèries, que vol dir entaforar-se dins les venes d'un mateix i clavar-hi la bandera. Començar el vers pel final, recomençar, abans néixer. He dit abans néixer, calia dir postmorir, calia dir pensar cap endarrere. Voldria perdre'm pel carreró on es conreen els fetus. Aquest és l'objectiu primer. Aquesta és la meva resistència. I ho deixem aquí. M'ha fet molta il·lusió participar en aquesta iniciativa tan bonica, perquè Sant Jordi al final el que ha de fer és travessar fronteres i propagar-se, perquè l'idea de combinar la naturalesa, la natura, no? I les flors amb la literatura i els llibres crec que és incomparable i segurament, doncs, com a més llocs on arribi, més llocs i més gent se la voldrà fer seva, aquesta tradició. Moltes gràcies i llarga vida a la poesia.
Hello, my name is Sharon Dolan and I'm here celebrating Sant Jordi with you and happily reading poems from my translations from Catalan of Gemma Gorga's poetry, and the name of the collection is Late to the House of Words. I'm going to read you some poems again by Gemma Gorga that I translated. The first one is the title poem for the collection. It contains the title within it. It's called Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. We showed up late to the House of Words. Now we grope our way down stairs as painful as vertebrae and search between the wall's plastered shards for some living syllable, sister to bread and poverty, to bring to our lips, such as a name, a woman's name, the bone of a woman's name lost between the stones of these walls that once upon a time housed flesh inside, and perhaps a jewel, a little box, a mirror you could ask, so many things. I'm going to read you a bunch of short poems. This is called So Then She. With flour and water she worked his body. With flour and saliva she conceived, leaned, learned that with flour and both hands you reach the secret pliability of matter. With flour and lips she worked the man down to the unbearable elasticity of tenderness. Then slowly she tasted his body, the bread that was his body, bread that fit as well in her hands as does light on earth. It's kind of an alternative creation story for you. The rest of the poems, they're short, and a lot of them are about words and language. This one is called Kaleidoscope. I turn the capricious kaleidoscope of the dictionary between my fingers. Sometimes a poem appears, radial and symmetrical, carrying my frame of mind. Sometimes I wonder if it won't be the other way around, if it won't be my frame of mind to adapt symmetrically to the words received, deceived, retrieved, to say. Who was she? She had a crucifix at the head of her bed, and she wasn't a believer. A busted suitcase in a corner of her bedroom, and she crossed no border. An apron pocket full of candies, and she had no sweet tooth. A lavender lipstick matching the shade of her skin, and 2 cashmere blouses. But she never left the slow, inclined orbit of mourning. All these things she had. Who was she? If only I knew how to look for her in whatever she didn't have. That's a poem I believe is about one of the poet's grandmothers who passed away. This is from the final collection that I excerpt in this selected poems. And this poem is called Hospitality of the Blank Page. Since there are too many of us creatures for so little love, I put the word in the lock and beckon angels and flies, gods and bumblebees, nettles and petals to come inside with me and occupy democratically this new home of empty lungs. Just 2 more, I believe. Venomous species. Words are this collection of tiny seeds stored under the tongue. At any moment, the possibility exists of spitting one out and killing someone. Likewise, of swallowing one and dying. And this is the final poem in this selected poems, and it's called Decreation. Learn from crabs the peaceful art of going backwards. Learn to unlearn, go shoeless, digress, surprise yourself yet again. Look at an apple until you liberate it from the fine dust of allegory. Know nothing about what you should know. Forget artificial rhetoric and the boring mechanics of the atom. Look without saying, I am looking. Love without saying, I am loving. Leave verses unfinished. Leave verses. Leave. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to share with you some of Gemma Gorka's poetry.
Hi, my name is Johanna McCalmont and I translate from French, German, Italian and Dutch. I'm also one of the co-editors of the World Kidlit blog along with Claire Story and Jackie Friedman-Meidel, so I'm particularly excited to have the chance to celebrate World Kidlit Month with you. The book I'd like to tell you about is this very beautiful picture book called Just to See. It was originally written in French by Morgane Decadier and illustrated by Florian Piget. My English translation, edited by Summer Laurie, was recently published by Blue Dot Kids Press. It is a story about the little girl that you can see on the cover here. She's very adventurous and very curious. As she lives in a forest and she thinks that she knows all of the plants and animals. But one day she notices something that she didn't see the day before. So she sets out just to see what it is. I'll read a few pages in French and then a few pages in English. And then after that, I'm afraid I'll have to leave you to try to find a copy of the book for yourself so that you can discover what happens at the end.
Juste pour voir, de Morgane Decadier et Florian Piget. Je connais la forêt par cœur. Depuis ma cabane, je l'observe chaque jour. Je scrute chaque détail à des kilomètres à la ronde. Tiens, qu'est-ce que c'est? Ce n'était pas là hier.
I know the forest inside out.
Every day I watch it from my treehouse. I study every little thing for miles around. Wait, what's that? It wasn't there yesterday. Let's go and see. Hi. Hello. So it's you I saw from my treehouse. Why are your antlers so tall? Well, they never fell off, so I just let them grow. Why? No reason, just to see. It says here that male deer shed their antlers annually during the winter months, but yours have been growing for such a long time. I wonder how far they go. Can I climb them? If you want, you can tell me what you see. Don't worry about me. I've done this before. Right hand, right foot, left foot, and repeat. The secret is to not look down. And the little girl climbs up and up and up, and she meets lots of other little animals. But I'll have to leave you to discover those for yourself. Thank you for listening.
Hello everyone, my name is Mina Kounghye Kwon. I'm going to read an excerpt from my translation of a traditional Korean puppet play called Kokdugak시 노름. Kokdugak시 노름 is the most representative traditional puppet theater extant in Korea. It was performed by itinerant folk performance troupes called Namsadang in the 18th and 19th centuries. I'm going to read a small section from Scene 1, Park Cheom-ji's Sightseeing, bilingually first in Korean and then in English. In this scene, you will hear Park Cheom-ji, an old nobleman poser, conversing with one of the musicians. Some parts are supposed to be delivered in a traditional singing style.
팔도강산 유람차로 나왔으면 어디 다녔단 말씀이요? 어디 다닌 걸 일러 달라고? 그래? 아따 그 사람 똑똑히는 알려고 하네. 알려면 똑똑히 알아야지. 네 그럼 다닌 곳을 똑똑히 일러줄게. 들어봐라. 남대문 밖을 썩 나섰구나. 7패, 8패, 정패, 배다리, 여우개꼬개, 신방뜰, 남태령을 썩 넘어서니 갈 곳이 망연구나. 죽장 짚고 망에 신어라 천리 강산을 구경 가자. 전라도라 지리산이면 하동 섬진강 구경하고 경상도라 태백산이면 상주 낙동강 구경하고 강원도라 금강산이면 12,000봉 구경하고 함경도라 백두산이면 2만 강수를 구경하고 황해도라 9월산이면 성지불상을 구경하고 평안도라 묘향산이면 청천강수를 구경하고 충청도라 계룡산이면 공주금강을 구경하고 경기도라 삼각산이면 파주 임진강 구경하고 그런 구경을 모두 다 하려면 몇 날이 될 줄을 모르겠네. 아 여보시오 영감님 어디 다녔나 일러보라고 했지 누가 소리하라고 했어? 참 그렇군. 그러니까 늙으면 죽기 마련이구만. Traveling around the mountains and rivers? Which ones have you been to? So you want me to tell you which different places I have been to? That's right. Ha! This person really wants to know all the details. Sure, I might as well hear all about it. All right then. I'm going to tell you about all the wonderful places I have been to, so listen well. Out of the south gate, here I go. Passing by 7패 market, 8패 market, 정패마켓, 배다리, 여우제고개, 신방뜰, 남태령, and after that, how much further should I go? In straw shoes with a bamboo cane, let's go see the mountains and rivers. In Jeolla province, Mount Jiri and the Seomjin River in Hadong. In Gyeongsang province, Mount Taebaek and the Nakdong River in Sangju. In Gangwon province, Mount Kumgang and its 12,000 peaks. In Hamgyong province, Mount Baekdu and the river of Tuman. In Pyongan province, Mount Myohyang and the river of Cheongcheon. In Hwanghae province, Mount Guwon and the scenic Buddhist temples. In Chungcheong province, Mount Gaeryong and the Kum River in Gongju. In Gyeonggi province, Mount Samgak and the Imjin River in Paju. For all this sightseeing, I have no idea how many days it takes. Hey, old man, I asked you to tell me where you have traveled. I didn't ask you to sing a song. Oh, you're right. I'm losing my mind. An old man must be close to death.
Hello, my name is Kabareta Club. I'm going to read 2 poems, that is for Jill. And the first poem that I would like to read is entitled To the Parent of a Caged Child. I wrote this poem in 2018, June 2018, actually. And the poem was evoked by the United States policy in 2018 to separate children from their parents at the US-Mexico border. I would like to dedicate this poem to victims of war and displacement around the globe. I initially wrote the poem in English and translated it into Amharic, the Ethiopian national language. And I will read the Amharic version, and Chris is going to read the translation. And one other poem that I will read in Amharic, originally written and translated by Chris Bucket, and he's going to read the translation. So the Amharic version of that poem is entitled ለታሰረው ሕፃን ወላጅ። ዋጋ ካለው ያን የሰጡሽን ቁጥር ጠበቅ አድርገሽ ያዥው። የግል ቦርሳሽ ይመስል የግል ቋጠሮሽ ያህል ከእስር ቤት መግቢያው በር ላይ ያስረከብሽውን ልጅሽን ያልበረታ ሕፃንሽን ደግም መልሰሽ እንድታቅፊው ጸልይ። ልጅሽ ከቁጥሩ እንዲዛመድ መለያሽ እሱ ነውና ምናልባት ፀሐይ ብትወጣ አበባውን ብታደምቀው እንቡጡን አትለይምና ጸልይ። ቁጥሩን በቁጥርሽ እንድትለይ ለልጅሽ ማንባቱ ይብቃሽ። የሐዘን ጽዋሽ ሞልቷል። ለዝንተ ዓለም ለሚመጡት ሰለባዎች ይዳረሳል። ቀና ብለሽ ሰማይ እነሆ ጀርባሽ ባዶ ነው። ሸክሙን ልብሽ አውርዷል። የጫንቃሽ ጭንቀት ቀሏል። የልብሽ ሸክም በስቷል። ፍቅርሽን ጉያሽ ሸሽጊው። በልብሽ ማህደር ያዥው። የእስር ኬላዎች የሚሰብር ድንበራትን የሚሻገር ርህራሄ አልባውን ገድፎ ለምለም ልቦች ላይ የሚሰፍር ሰብአዊነት ላይ የሚጸገይ ሰብአዊነት ላይ የሚከብር ነውና። Thank you. Chris, could you read the English version?
I feel a bit strange because actually you wrote this poem in English and then translated it into Amharic. So what I'm going to read is not my translation, but it's not your translation either. It's your original, actually. So it's a privilege that you asked me to read it for you, Kapadich.
I'd be honored.
To the parent of a caged child. Keep the number they gave you. If it is valid to reclaim your child like a backpack, like stuff, an item of contraband, you handed in by the entrance of a jailhouse.
Pray your toddler is tagged properly. You may not recognize the bud if you see the light again, illuminating the flower. No more tears for your child. The well of sorrow is full, enough for all the victims to come. Stand still. Your back is free. Your burden loaded onto your heart. Hold your love tight. The mighty power that reaches across the wire cages, across boundaries, anywhere fertile, skipping the dry spots, devoid of humanity.
Thank you very much, Chris. The second poem that I'm going to read is from the anthology Chris and Alamu Tabeja edited, and the title is Tat Wadajun Siata. I wrote this poem when I was in concentration camps in Somalia during the war between Ethiopia and Somalia. I was actually almost a teenager when I wrote that poem, but it is still relevant. And the title is Tat Wadajun Siata. እንዲህ እንዳሁኑ ብዕር እንደዋዛ ተዘንግቶ ሳይቀር ጣት ወዳጁን አጥቶ መሬት ሳይቆረቆር የብሶት ተካፋይ ንጹህ ብራና አጥቶ ለምድር ሳይናገር ተቀባይ ሳያጣ መልእክት የሚያሰፍር ሁሉም በየመልኩ ይሰፍር ነበረ ለመጻፍ ተነስቶ ብዕር ካመረረ ካንጀት ካመረረ ደም ይተፋል ብዕር ቢያጥቡት የማይነጻ ቢቀቡት የማይሽር እሳት ቢጨምሩት ነዲድ ሆኖ የሚገር ደረቁ ብራና እንዲህ ሳይወረዛ ተዘንግቶ ሳይቀር ብዕር እንደዋዛ ነጋሪት ሳይጎሽም ጽንፍን ያዳርሳል ፍላጻው ሳይታይ ወርውሮ ያቆስላል ያለፈውን ጥሶ አዲስ ይገነባል እንዲህ ሳይከታ ወሰን ተሰርቶለት ህሊናም እንደግር ሰንሰለት ታስሮለት በእንስሳት ደረጃ ምኞቷ ዘቅዝቆ የማደግ ስሜቱ አእምሮውን ለቆ ጎህ ሲቀድ ለሌሊት ሲመሽ ጎህ ሲቀድ ለዕለት ሲመሽ ለሌሊቱ ስጋው ትቢያ እንዳይሆን እንዳይፈርስ አጥንቱ ህልሙ ይሄ ሆኖ ስጋቱ ፍራቱ ብዕር ጓደኛውን ጣትን ሳይዘነጋ ምድሪቱን ቆርቁሮ ለሷ ሳያወጋ አእምሮ ሲቆስል እሱ ደም ይተፋል ቀለሙ ኃይል አለው በመልኩ ያቀልማል ተዘንግቶ ሳይቀር እንዲህ እንደዋዛ የመኖር ፍላጎት ህሊናን ሳይገዛ ያኔ ታዛዥ ሳለ ላንጋፋ አእምሮ መልእክቱ በቀለም በብራናው ጭሮ ይናገር ነበረ ብዕር አፍ አውጥቶ አርቆ ይበራል አክናፉን ዘርግቶ አሮጌውን ንዶ አዲሱን መስርቶ ካንጀት ከወደደ ካደነቀ ዓለምን እንደ ቀሳሚ ንብ በአበባ እንዳረፈ ከቀሰመ ፍቅርን ይጽፍ ነበር ብዕር የውበት ውዳሴን የተፈጥሮን ትንግርት የዓለም ሱታፌን በጥዑመ ቃሉ ጣዕም እየሰጠ በኪነት ልሳኑ ልብ እየመሰጠ ወዶ እያስወደደ ቤተ ፍቅር አንጾ ፍቅረ ላይ ገልጾ የራሱን አፍቅሮት ባንባቢው አስርጾ የውበት አይኑንም ለሌላው ለግሶ እዩበት ይል ነበር ያልታየውን ደሶ እንዲህ እንዳሁኑ ብዕር እንደዋዛ ተዘንግቶ ሳይቀር የብሶት ተካፋይ ንጹህ ብራና አጥቶ ለምድር ሳይናገር Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, it sounds so beautiful in Amharic, it really does. I feel a bit, I always feel a bit strange reading, one beside the other because the English sounds so flat, when you hear it beside the Amharic. Anyway, this poem, I do remember translating together with Alimu, and we both loved this poem so much. So thank you for allowing us to put it in the anthology, and I'm really looking forward to reading. It's an extended metaphor poem, and it's at once For me, it's at once very, very moving, but also absolutely delightful and charming. Before my finger loses its best friend. Before my finger loses its best friend, before it casually forgets its pen and begins tapping on the ground, before the clean sheet disappears on which it pours out its complaint, conversing with the world, before it gives away the means to write its message, share the panorama of its thoughts, using a pen determined to write soberly, and when it's sober, writes in blood-red ink, unwashawayable. And if anybody tries to scrub its writing off or overpaint, it flares up. And if they try to burn it down, the dry sheet will turn wet before my finger casually forgets its pen. Without a drumbeat, it can carry across borders. Without an arrow, it will penetrate the eye, demolish buildings, put up new ones. It will never be confined because the mind cannot be chained like legs. Its dreams cannot be lowered to subhuman levels. Before its aspiration will evaporate at daybreak when night fades to protect flesh from lifting off the bone and changing into dust. When mind is deep in worry about enemies. Before a pen loses sight of its best friend. Before it starts talking to the ground by tapping on it. When the brain is restless, bleeds a little. When imagination is all powerful, bright red. Before anything is casually forgotten. Before the mind sells out in order to survive. When it is docile to its inner consciousness, write down its message, ink on paper. Now the pen speaks, spreads its wings, flies endless distances, demolishes the old, builds new. And if the pen falls in love soberly, like a bee sucking droplets from a flower, if it sips love from the ink pot, then it will write in praise of beauty, how the world is blessed with wonders. Beautiful words will beautify its work, enchant its readers with artistic voice, put love into the house it builds, removing the old view, replacing with its own. So readers see love through the pen's eye, a pen's precise perspective, as hopefully is happening now, before my finger casually forgets its friend, or the clean sheet of paper disappears, on which it pours out this complaint, before my pen finds itself speaking to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kristen Gehrman, and I am the English translator of The Tree and the Vine by Dola de Young, published by Transit Books. The Tree and the Vine is a novel set in Amsterdam in the year before the Nazi invasion. It tells the story of the tumultuous friendship between two women, the untamable Erica and the more quiet and reserved Bea. The longer the two women live together, the more romantic feelings start to develop. However, these feelings remain largely unspoken because the narrator of the story, Bea, struggles to face them. As the story goes on, it becomes clear that Erica is actually part Jewish, and she begins to act out. Her behavior starts putting her in more and more danger, and this puts increased stress on the two women's relationship. So I'll read from the first few pages of the book, and I hope you will be as intrigued by this wonderful classic as I was when I first read it. I met Erica in 1938 at the home of a mutual acquaintance. A superficial acquaintance as far as I was concerned, and not someone I wanted to invest a lot of time in. Vicenç and I had spent 6 months lying next to each other in a hospital room, and our time together didn't inspire me to get to know her any better. After a month and a half, I'd had my fill. Vicenç is the type of woman who, once she gets another woman to herself, casts out a net of feminine solidarity, and the only way to escape is to run away as fast as you can. But that wasn't an option for me at the time. She had thick skin, typical of her kind, and my lack of enthusiasm and feigned drowsiness only seemed to make her want to confide in me even more. After being released from the hospital 2 weeks before I was, she visited me often and brought me all kinds of flowers and treats. I felt like I couldn't simply ignore her after that, so every now and then I made a point to accept one of her many invitations. I had an aversion to offending people back then. Not that I can blame myself for it anymore. It was at her house that I met Erica. It was a warm summer evening, and I decided to ride my bicycle over to Vicenç to pay my obligatory visit. To be honest, I was hoping she wouldn't be home, that I'd be able to just drop a note in the mailbox and my duty would be done. But the door opened as soon as I rang the bell, and I once again found myself trapped. Erica was lying on the couch near the open doors to the balcony. When Vicenç introduced us, she seemed to hesitate for a moment as to whether she should stand up or stay lying down. My outstretched hand decided for her. With an agile swing of the legs, she slid off the couch. I was instantly attracted to her and forgot all about the burden of my visit. Even now, after all these years, I still picture Erica gliding off the couch and taking my hand. Her face was round and youthful, but there was something old about her mouth, as if it were being pulled down by the corners. She had a penetrating, somewhat melancholic look in her eyes. She was wearing sandals, bright blue wool socks, a pleated skirt, and a red sports blouse unbuttoned at the neck. Her blonde hair had been cut short with the fringe poking out at the back that made her look like a boy in the need of a haircut. In other words, she was dressed like a member of the Socialist Youth, a crowd I'd never felt very comfortable around. We had a couple of those girls at the office, and I stayed out of their way. But Erica seemed different. That first evening I got the impression that she was dressed this way because she was struggling to accept her own adulthood. Later I realized that her clothes were simply just the simplest solution to her financial stalemate. But I don't attach much value to that discovery anymore either. That night at Lisa's house, Erica's life became part of my own. It was a chance encounter, and I've often wondered what my life would have been like if we'd never met. For a long time I saw myself as an innocent bystander, but I now know that I changed my course for Erica. Whether my life would have been better or happier without her, who knows? I certainly don't. Within a month of meeting each other, we moved in together. I'd already been planning to move for a while. I'd had enough of landladies, and my women's boarding house had started to feel more like a boarding school. I'd been living there since I left home after my father died, and it was only out of laziness that I hadn't left yet. Erica, on the other hand, had had a decisive row with her mother and was looking for a new place to live. The rental contract for the apartment on the Prinsengracht was in my name. Erica was working as a journalist for News Post at the time and earning a novice's salary. Her position was just one step up from volunteer, the bait they used in those days to lure young people in and exploit them for all they were worth. Before that, she'd spent 2 years volunteering at a local newspaper and sponging off her mother's income. Now she was stuck paying Ma back. It was a vicious cycle, and a fate shared by many young people during the Depression. The way that Erica talked about her mother made me laugh that first year. No matter what happened, she'd find the humor in it. At the time, I didn't understand what was behind all her joking around about Ma. I simply enjoyed her talent for storytelling. "Ma called," she'd holler on her way up the stairs to our apartment after work. "The General is going on vacation, and Ma can't go." Once upstairs, she'd give an embellished report of all her mother's complaints about the retired warhorse whose household she commandeered. That first year with Erica on the Prinsengracht was full of surprises. Looking back, I have no idea how I accepted her often peculiar behavior with so little resistance. Of course, I saw her struggles and conflicts, but in those years it was as if they were projected like silhouettes on a white screen. Only later, after I had some insight into Erica's background, did the images take on form and color. In those first 12 months together, I was spared the agony of understanding, simply because I was predisposed to restraint. We'd decided to each lead our own lives. It was a condition we'd set, prompted by an infantile desire to preserve some imaginary idea of freedom, a concession that, although we never actually demanded it from each other or had any deeper need for it, seemed important to us back then. It was an aggressive reaction to our youth, in which we, perhaps Erica more so than I, had had little opportunity to nurture our own sense of freedom. We clung to it in ways that seem frantic to me now. This condition is what held me back from the giving and accepting that comes with a deeper friendship. Our attempt not to meddle in each other's lives made that first year of living together a tour de force and a long exercise in self-discipline on my part. Due to the instability of Erica's nature, there was no regularity in our household to speak of. Nevertheless, a steady routine emerged, one that we could stick to without feeling encumbered by it. We didn't talk about it. Our life together just developed naturally. I persuaded the landlord to knock down a wall so that Erica would get the alcove that connected our 2 rooms. My bed was pushed up against the sliding doors, and although they were always closed, we could still have late-night conversations before falling asleep. She in her bed in the alcove, and me in mine behind the doors. I'd closed those doors before we'd even signed the rental agreement. We were visiting the apartment for a 3rd time, just to make sure we'd made the right choice. Renting an apartment and all of the responsibilities that came with it brought me a lot of anxiety, which mostly hit me at night. But I didn't let it show. That Sunday afternoon, I stood in the back room and Erica in the alcove. "Are you sure you want the front room, Erica?" I asked. She nodded enthusiastically. "I'd rather have to hear cars and street noise than that," she said, pointing to the balcony doors, which opened to the back sides of the houses on the street behind us. "Fishwives and domestic disputes. I've had enough of that to last a lifetime." I didn't understand what she meant. The house where Erica and her mother lived with the general was on the upscale Minerva lawn. But I let it drop. "Let's just tear down that wall, and then you can have the alcove. Otherwise your half is too small, and my room is bigger. You can use the extra space for your bed and maybe a little table." "Oh, let's just tear down that wall," she mimicked. "You think the landlord is crazy?" "I'll handle it," I said, feeling suddenly quite sure of myself. "And otherwise we'll pay for it ourselves." She gave me a probing look. "You know I don't have any money, don't you? But if you're so sure that the landlord—" "So it's a deal?" I asked. "We'll sign?" She nodded slowly, without enthusiasm, and without taking her eyes off me. For a moment of reprieve, I walked to the back of the house and closed the balcony doors. Then, with a knowing glance in Erica's direction, which elicited no reaction from her whatsoever, I closed the sliding doors in the middle of the room as well. This gesture was meant to symbolize our agreement to let each other be free, but in that moment, I didn't quite know how to put it into words. This was the first few pages of The Tree and the Vine by Dola de Young, translated by me, Kristen Gehrman, and published by Transit Books. Thanks for listening.
Hello! We're here to read you part of a very exciting story that was written a long time ago, almost 100 years ago, in a country that doesn't even exist anymore, called Yugoslavia. It was written by a guy called Aleksandar Vucko, and his friend helped him, Dusan Matic. And the story is called The Fine Feats of the Five Cockroach Gang. Podvizi pet petliča. The story is made up of 6 songs. You don't think so? And we're going to read from the first song. No. The first song goes like this. First song, in which the main characters of this tale are described. From the window of the grocer, where a pyramid of chocolates reaches high up toward the sky, and the barber's soapy odor, as the barber shop sits waiting for the next beard to come by, while out front its sign is swinging, like a sunshine yellow plate. This street here is very crooked, for it's truly like a river. As along its course it wends, it has charted its own route, past the houses and the taverns, by the shops, all the way around the town till the corner where it stops, where there looms walls tall and mute, twixt blackened sides of an old house and under leafy shadows, a young ladies' institute. Most days in the afternoons, that's the spot they gather. 5 boys, 5 age mates, 5 aces. First, the kid who goes by Crocker, when called for, can scale any wall. When he squints hard with his left eye through the blackest of eclipses, he'll even spot a spider web. That's how keen his vision is. Even though he works real hard, the life he lives is awfully poor. For his savage master Lazar, a locksmith, old and mean and scarred, who drowses lazy all day long, flogs him hard. And while the dead dull ABCs try to teach the kids at school that jacks of all trades win the day, when Lazar counts his gold by ounce, putting money in his drawer, his apprentice hears him roar, "No one really learns a trade until he's suffered by the blade. A tradesman's useless with no tools. Why should I pay you, little fool? Why give you warm shows, coat, and hat, when even Vapa, little rat, could stay alive without all that?" The second boy is Big Gulp Nori. He goes by Nor for short. A friend in need he'll always save, against all odds, no matter what. Harder than an old tin can, lighter than a ship at sail, patient as a fisherman, and faster than a raging gale. Not a day or night goes by with Nori feeling full. In the textile factory, where machines the livelong day are busy weaving wool, little Nori is required to scrub the floors, although he's tired and never given a mouthful. Yet every day, when work is done, when the hungry evening gapes, a wondrous wish inside his chest lights up his insides with its shape. He'd like, just for a little while, real fast, to become a great big whale, and like a tram car or a swallow, across the hills or swamps to wallow, up to the factory at last, and finding there his savage bosses, chicken breasts and night shirts, heaving, hop! In one gulp, they'd get swallowed, and at last he would be even. Third comes Johnny, tender child, doesn't like tip-tat or ball. Let those who want to run around, and in the baking summer sun, let their noses get well browned. They can tussle, they can tumble, fast and fleet. He's not worried about keeping clean and neat. He would rather, doesn't matter, watch the airplanes flying high, flying weightless through blue sky. But when, after the long day, finally comes deep dark night, then within him there awakens a certain enigmatic might. And unlike kids and most grown-ups, Johnny has no need to peek out from underneath the sheets or to tremble, "What's that moving? What's approaching all around?" He has no need, since for years now, he and all the vampires have known each other and been friends, as have the mute ghosts, ghouls most evil, fluttering moths, and nighttime beetles. Number 4 within the troop has the following attributes. The second that he spots a tree, in him a crazy monkey wakes, and in 2 or 3 light leaps he scrambles to the very top. There his lemon yellow head peeks out and makes the thick leaves shake. Whether it's a small pear tree or the tallest forest pine, he has no fear of highest heights. And from spots where no BB gun could ever hope to reach, he never thinks of taking fright. Instead, he dangles, swings at angles, as though he were tied to the branch with knots of arms made fast like twine. Even though his name is Mita, no one knows this name of his, and the whole town calls him Bulgy. 'Cause he always, God knows why, when he's asked about any question, he bulges out his eyes like mad and scowls hard, as if a wild beast suddenly had seized him with a cry, or right there and then he'd seen a crystal goblet crashing down like thunder from clear sky. The 5th and final cockerel, who goes by Captain Joe, is full of courage, very strong, and like granite stone he's ready, from his head down to his toes, to take the whole task on alone. The captain's mind is like a razor, and his brain's elastic too. When he slaps, it's hot as wildfire. His disposition burns bright blue. Whatever dire thing might occur, and might affect our little cockerels, our Joe won't be slippery slimy, but like a stubborn man from China, he will stop all saboteurs, even when things come to blows, and the bruises start to show. He'll keep up the gang's bright glory, and ensure that the fine deeds of this plucky group of friends are never overgrown by weeds. So we'll stop there. I hope everyone has enjoyed the introduction, and it's a teaser. You can read the whole story sometime soon. Okay, bye-bye! Bye-bye!
Hi everyone! I am Stefani J. Alvarez, an artist from Cagayan City in the southern Philippines. I write originally in Filipino, and my friend Alton Melvar M has translated my works into English for modern poetry in translation in the United Kingdom, a Samtang Journal in Taiwan, Tolka Journal in Ireland, and Roasted Radishes in Lebanon. My works have also been anthologized at the Oxford Anthology of Translation and forthcoming in several other international publications. From 2008 until 2022, I was based in Saudi Arabia as a migrant worker, and most of my works are set there. Currently, I am in Germany since my partner is from here, and because I was granted an artist residency by the Academy Schloss Solitude in Stuttgart. I felt so much gratitude to Jill, a Women Plus in Translation reading series, and its founders, Larissa Kyzer and Lisbeth Redfeld, for having me and Alton in their 2023 Spotlight for Trans and Non-Binary Authors and Translators. Thank you for having me. And now I'm going to read an excerpt, first in the Filipino original by yours truly, and then in English translation by Alton. This is from my book in progress, Transfinity Diary, a portmanteau of transgender and infinity. This is my own lyric meditation of the plight of migrant Filipino workers in the Middle East, most especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as a metapoetic retelling of my transition into becoming who I really am, a woman. Ang Hori. Ito ang manuskritong di ko matapos-tapos isulat. Nanggagambala ang mundo ng realidad. At tulad ng naratipong ito, bilang na ang mga araw ko. Para akong masintensya habang nakapiit sa lockdown sa Saudi Arabia. Isang linggong natitira at mag-expire ng aking ikama o residence ID. Kung hindi ako makakahanap ng trabaho, tuluyan na akong pauwiin ng Pinas. Kung ang pagbalik Pinas ay tuturing na paglaya sa 13 taon ko lang pananatili sa gitnang silangan, maaring hindi sa panahong ito. Hindi sa panahong patuloy na naliligalig ang krisis at pandemya. Hindi pa ako handa. O maaaring hindi ko pa kayang manatili sa Pinas lalo na sa gitna ng kawalang kasiguraduhan. Nakatanaw ako sa labas ng bintana habang nakaupo sa couch hawak ang nakatiklop na libro ng mga tula. Ang bago mo ako ipalaot ni Luna Sikat Cleto. Hindi ko na mabilang kung ilang beses ko nang paulit-ulit na sinusuyod ang mga saknong. Ani mo isang tahimik na paglalayag habang nagpapatianod sa alon, ngunit sa kailaliman nilalabon ako't nilulunod ng daluyong. Doon ko paulit-ulit na binabalikan ang mga katanungang di ko kailanman hinanapan ng katapusan at mga kasagutan. Tinatanaw ko ang dikalayuan. Pagkatapos ay inililigaw ko ang aking paningin sa mga nakapalibot na mga gusali na nakaharang sa Cornish area, ang malungkot na dalampasigan ng Persian Gulf, isang napakahabang linya ang King Fahd Highway na lumalagos ang paruot, paritong mga sasakyan, at mga iskinitang may mangilan-ngilang naglalakad. Nasisilip ko mula sa ika-4 na palapag ng apartment na tinitirhan namin simula nung kasagsagan ng lockdown, curfew, at quarantine. Pagkalipas ng ilang sandali, mararamdaman kong natutuyo ang aking paningin, ngunit bago ako Bago ko ikukurap, titinglain ko ang langit. Maaliwalas, wala ako nababasang panganib roon hanggat di ko gagawing buksan ang durungawan o kaya lalabas ako lalo na sa katanghaliang tapat. Literal nagbabagang init na nasa higit 40 sentigrado. Umiihip ang hangin tangay-tangay ang mapipinong buhangin sa kalakhang disyerto. Totoong napakalayo sa nakalimutang kong ganda na pinagmamayabang ng mga tanawin sa Pinas. Ngunit, bakit hindi ko pipiliing umuwi? Bakit kailangan kong manatili? Maaring pinanindigan ko ang salita ni Virginia Woolf. Bilang isang babae, wala akong sariling bayan. Bilang isang babae, ang aking bayan ay ang buong mundo. Naputol ang aking pagninilay ng tumunog ang doorbell. Inaasahan ko ang pagdating ni Michael mula sa trabaho. Lampas 3:00 na pala ng hapon at tulad ng magsisiyam na buwang wala akong trabaho, di ko namamalayan ang takbo ng oras. Pagkagising ko sa umaga hanggang sa pag-alis ni Michael papunta sa trabaho, maiiwan akong mag-isa sa higit 100 kwadradong parisukat na apartment. Muli sa kanyang pag-uwi, sa pagsapit ng dapit hapon at lagi para akong nilalamon sa kalaliman ng gabi. Sa katunayan, nakaalalay si Michael sa aking mga pangangailangan lalo na sa pinansyal. Ngunit nakakaramdam ako ng kawalang halaga sa tuwing inaabot na lamang niya sa akin ang pera padala para sa aking pamilya sa Pinas at ang pambayad ko sa housing amortization. Sa bahay kung saan kasalukuyan nakatirang aking ina at 2 pamangkin sa Cagayan de Oro. "Hello, how's my mousy?" Laging bungad niya sa pag-uwi. Isang indie engineer si Michael. Suot niya ang isang asol na coverall. Mapapansin ang ilang mantsa ng grasa mula sa malalaking equipment sa loob ng workshop. Huhubarin muna niya ito at itapon ng suot na face mask. Saglit na maghuhugas ng kamay saka ako yakapin. Matapos siya magpalit ng damit, magharap kami sa upuan. Hahayaang manunuot ang lamig ng aircon habang humihigop ng mainit na kape. Sa gabing ito, muli naming napag-usapan ang ilang option kung hindi na ako makakahanap ng trabaho at kailangan kong umuwi. Sabi niya, babayaran niya ang aking ikama renewal at working permit. Nasa 10,000 Saudi Riyal o higit 100,000 piso para lang may tsansa ako manatili sa Saudi. Makapaghanap pa ng trabaho at syempre pa, magkasama kami. Kung walang COVID-19 travel restrictions, madali ang pagpasok niya bilang tourist at papalanuhin ang papanatili sa Pinas. Ngunit sa kasalukuyan, hindi siya maaaring makapasok. At dahil hindi maaaring mangyari yun sa ngayon, ang huling opsyon namin ay pwedeng i-give up niya ang trabaho sa Saudi at magbalik Germany. Maaari kasi makasama ng German national ang kanilang non-European partner kahit walang papel sa ligang na pagsasama o higit pa o hindi pa kasal. 2 beses na akong isinama ni Michael sa Alemanya. Napakabukas ng kanilang pananaw sa pagsasama na hindi tinitingnan ang lahi, kasarian at pagkakakilanlan. Holy 2020, kasama ako sa libu-libong OFWs na nawalan ng trabaho dahil sa pagsasara ng mga kumpanyang apektado ng pandemic crisis. Nag-apply ako online. Bungad sa taong 2021 na makatanggap ako ng email mula sa isang employer para sa online interview. Naipasa ko ang low-face interview at maswerteng napili mula sa higit 200 aplikante bilang senior administrator sa Spark Project, ang pinakamalaking hub utility industry sa Saudi Arabia. Isinumiti ko ang aking dokumento, kopya ng pasaporte at resident ID. 3 buwan kong hinintay ang employment offer hanggang sa makatanggap ako ng abiso mula sa HR. Na-delay ang proseso ng aking transfer of employment dahil inilipat nila ang aking job line-up batay sa kasariang nakatatak sa aking pasaporte. Nanlamig ako. Bumalot ang di maipaliwanag ng mga pangamba. This is Hori, a manuscript I can seem to finish, but the real world is more unsettling. Unlike this story, my days are almost over. This lockdown in Saudi Arabia feels like an imprisonment sentence to me. I have a week left before my Ikama or residence ID expires. If I can't find a job, I will be sent back home to the Philippines. I dreamed that my homecoming would feel like liberation after my 13 years of stay in Middle East, but not this time. Especially not this time when crisis and pandemic continue to rage on. I'm not yet ready, or I don't want to go back to the Philippines in the midst of all this uncertainty. I look out into the window while sitting on the couch. In my hand, a folded book, poems, Lunatic at Clitos, Before You Set Me Afloat. I could no longer remember the many times I forged through its stanzas, like a silent voyage while drifting through sea waves, only to be swallowed up and drowned by its depths. In my head, the questions I had never sought closure and answers to, on repeat. I looked out into the distance. My eyes wandered the surrounding buildings that block the Cornish area, the lonely coastline of Persian Gulf, King Fahd Highway's long traffic line, and its alleys and few pedestrians. I can see all of them from the fourth floor of the apartment I've been confined in since the lockdown, curfew, and quarantine. As my eyes dry out, I blinked and looked up to the sky, surreal and clear. No impending doom as long as I don't open the windows or come out at noon. Outside, it is over 40 degrees Celsius, literal scorching heat, dry wind against fine sand of the immense desert. Very far from the lush of the landscape of home, but why did I choose to go home? Why do I have to stay? Then I remember Virginia Woolf's words. As a woman, I have no country. As a woman, my country is the whole world. The doorbell rouses me from reverie. I always look forward to Michael coming home from work. Already, it is past 3 in the afternoon. Being jobless for over 9 months, time, as it passes, now loads me. From the moment I wake up in the morning until Michael arrives from work, I am left alone in this 100 square feet apartment. I succumb to the depths of night the way daylight is swallowed by dusk. Michael, my light, is to take care of my needs, especially financially. And I feel helpless every time he hands me the remittance for my family back home and my housing amortization payment, in the house where my mother and 2 nieces currently live in Cagayan de Oro. "Hello, how's my mousy?" is his usual greeting. And indeed the engineer, Michael dons a blue coverall. The stains of grease from the workshop large equipment are noticeable in it. He removes it, tosses out his face mask, washes his hands, and then enfolds me in his arms. He then gets changed. In the chair, we settle down opposite each other, giving permission to the air conditioning's cold to pierce us while we sopped up hot coffee. This night, like the other nights, we talk through the alternatives in case if I cannot find a job here and going back home is the only recourse. He says he will shoulder the expenses of my ICAMA renewal and working permit, about 10,000 Saudi Riyal or more than 100,000 in Philippine peso, just so that I can have a chance to stay behind, find a job, and of course, so that we can be together. Had there been a COVID-19 travel restrictions, it would have been trouble-free for him to set foot in the Philippines as a tourist and plan our stay there. But that's not possible right now. Our last resort is for him to quit from his job here in Saudi and go back to Germany. There, a German citizen can bring their non-European partner even if they don't have legal papers yet or they remain unmarried. Michael has taken me to Germany twice. They have very broad-minded beliefs on civil partnership and matrimony, regardless of race, gender, and identity. In July of 2020, I was one of the thousands of migrant Filipino workers who were laid off because of the closure of the industries affected by the pandemic. I did a job hunting online. 2021 welcomed me with an email from a company arranging for an online interview. I came through the 2-phase interview and, as luck would have it, was picked from among more than 200 applicants as a senior administrator of Spark Project, the largest hub utility industry in Saudi Arabia. I turned to my documents, a copy of my passport and resident ID. I waited for 3 months for an employment offer only to receive a notification from the HR. There was a setback in the process of my transfer of employment because they decided to move my job line up based on the sex stamped on my passport. I shivered. An unfathomable dread has robbed all that I am.
Hello, good morning. My name is Modupe, and I'll be reading from my book, Poems for Children from the Animal Kingdom. Now, a brief background. I am a dentist. a specialist in periodontology, and I also love writing children's books. This book about poems is about the way animals behave in their kingdom, and I try to make it rhyme. And the funny thing about it is that I used my native language to name the animals, while I use the animal name to follow it. You will hear me saying Kolo Kolo, the coney fox. Kolo Kolo is actually the name of fox in my native language. I'm from Nigeria and I'm from the Yoruba tribe. Thank you. I will start with Ekun, the wild tiger. In the deep wild African forest, there lived Ekun, a tiger at its best. He would growl, he would howl, he would shake the forest with his roar, which would make the eagles soar. The kings warned him, stop being a terror in the dim. First get to the outside world and see if you'll be able to run and flee like you do here at home, because you never have been to Rome, where tigers are seen in castles and die like kings with ancient titles. Ekun then begged the king, take me, let's go visiting. Let me see the outside world of fun, and let's burn down these trees covering the sun. Soon the king said, soon you will see, you will get to where you will be. Fun facts. Do you know that not only are the tigers fur striped, their skin is also striped. Here's a picture. Now let me go to another poem. Kolo Kolo, the coney fox. Would you believe in the period when animals could only talk in one accord? There was Kolo Kolo, the coney fox, who lived in an old shoe box. He would pretend to be one who couldn't speak and would shun. Many tried to be his friend. Nice messages they will send. He often will discourage it, and by the chicken barn he will sit, waiting for a chicken to stray. So he will set a trap from where he lay. His eyes would dart to and fro, not even noticing that the old crow, who knew better than others, would monitor him and call him 7 brothers. Together they pounced on Kolo Kolo and cut his tail, and round they tied his tail to a pail, so that whenever he moved to clang clang, the pail would bounce around bang bang. Another fun fact, do you know that foxes have whiskers on their legs and face, and also make up to 400 different sounds? Wow, 400 different sounds. And then I go to the fat lazy cow, Malu, the fat lazy cow. In Grandma's large diary, where the cows were rugged and fiery, she had a particular fat lazy cow who moved a little and takes a bow. She could only produce necessary milk and then rest on Grandma's fine linen made from silk. One sweet morning, the other cows prayed that Malu, the lazy cow, would move, but it stayed. After so much stress, Grandma knew she had to confess. This fat cow is the only good source of cheese and best company for the numerous geese. So rather than moan and mumble, she let the cows skip and tumble. She decided not to complain because it will surely be in vain, for the fat lazy cow will become good beef that will not be anybody's grief. Fun fact. Do you know that cow gives nearly 200,000 glasses of milk in its lifetime? 200,000. Wow. Aguto, the white lamb. Once in a little village up north, where everything was white and short, there lived a little old lady who had nothing much but a tree so shady. Everyone came to listen to her on her farm. She told stories that made people ponder. She was glad she made them wonder. That evening she told them another story about a lamb so joyful and white, and a baby born in a manger at night. Wonderful tale she did tell before the cook rang the dinner bell. Fun fact. Do you know that the lamb can walk just a few minutes after they are born? You know, babies, you have to carry them, they have to go through their milestones. But a few minutes after a lamb is born, it starts to walk. Wow. And so I go to, I'm still turning the pages, so Egon the angry vulture. One day while the vulture fed on a carcass and his roving eyes waited for time to pass, he thought another vulture would come in the nearest future. He then decided to fly away to find a pasture to lay. The rotten meat he took, and the rest of it he forsook. Before he could take on his flight, another vulture came to his plight. This vulture was ugly and greedier, to fight and tear to pieces any imposing leader. Unknown to the vulture, this greedier vulture was a king from another culture, and to him all rotten meat was brought. And so the fight began, and they fought as much as they could. They fought and they fought, till neither got the meat they sought. Do you know that vultures live everywhere in the world except in Australia and Antarctica? That's interesting, but at least they get to live in Africa. Alaió the timid frog. Once there was a little frog who lived to hide in a broken mug. Because on the mug were pictures of him painted around the mug and on its rim. However, this frog was timid, for all it loved was the weather so humid. His male frogs would croak thunderously, and all he did was shake cantankerously. His friends jeered him to scorn, and he hated why he was born. He never made any attempt to do any croaking for fear of contempt. But one morning so bright, he cleared up his throat so tight. He made a glorious loud croak, and other frogs saw him as a handsome bloke. Fun fact, do you know that frogs cannot vomit? They cannot vomit. Ẹlẹ́dẹ̀ the dirty pig. Once there was a dirty pig who loved to wallow in ponds along the dirty rig. But the horrible thing about this pig was that not even amongst his colleagues was found a pig so dirty that he hated additions. But would he even listen to corrections? He rarely did, as he hated subtractions. He would then pretend to sit on a throne and be on his own, and his numerous faults they would detect, and he would smile without any effect. However, he was content in his surroundings with his neck so bent that he hardly noticed when the flood washed away his pie in the mud. This is how Ẹlẹ́dẹ̀ the dirty pig lived, with all his food strewn in the mud. Fun fact, do you know that some pigs in China are the size of bears? Wow. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed my reading.
Hi, I'm Patricia Worth. I'm going to read to you from my translation of Les Coeurs Barbelés, a novel by Claudine Jacques, a New Caledonian author. The story is set in the 1980s, during a tragic political period known as Les Événements. The indigenous Kanak were beginning to stand up and demand independence from the French government, who'd colonised the islands in 1853. They'd kept Kanak on reserves behind barbed wire, hence the title Les Coeurs Barbelés, is roughly hearts behind barbed wire. The time and place are real, but the story is about a fictional couple, a Kanak man, and a white French woman, or a descendant of French settlers. The French and other white Europeans who've established themselves in New Caledonia are known in English as settlers. First I'll read for a minute from the original French text, and then I'll continue with my English translation of the first few pages. Nous sommes des gens des îles, l'horizon ne nous fait pas peur. Nouméa, octobre 1980. Malu respire vite, trop vite, encore haletante. Elle se racle la gorge, tousse à plusieurs reprises, le corps plié en deux. Réfugiée dans une cage d'escalier du boulevard Vauban, les yeux larmoyants, la bouche et le nez brûlés par les effluves des gaz, elle reprend peu à peu son souffle. Elle s'était trouvée par hasard au milieu de la foule hurlante en revenant de la bibliothèque où elle étudie chaque samedi matin et n'avait pu reprendre sa voiture garée sur le parking de la cathédrale, toujours poussée un peu plus loin par la manifestation qui venait de dégénérer. We are people of the islands. We are not afraid of the horizon. Nudawish Nesseline. Noumea, October 1980. Marla was breathing fast, too fast, still panting. She clears her throat and doubles over in a coughing fit. Sheltering in an entry foyer on Vauban Boulevard, her eyes watering, mouth and nose burnt by tear gas fumes, she gradually gets her breath back. She'd been caught up in the middle of a howling mob on her way back from the library where she studies every Saturday morning, and could not get to her car in the cathedral car park, continually pushed further away by the protest that had just degenerated. She does not understand what's motivating this sudden increase in anger and violence, but she knows the danger of it. No, it's not a fear of men, but rather fear of a wrong move, a fall, a crush, a stupid accident, because she might find herself in the wrong place at the wrong time. Already in July, a car had been set on fire by a Molotov cocktail right in the centre of the city. In August, the people had gathered en masse in front of the High Commission to demand the evacuation of French expats stuck in the New Hebrides. They wanted planes to repatriate the Francophone population as well as accommodation for them. She had taken part in it because two of her father's uncles had family roots in Santo. A shop window right beside her in Sebastopol Street had shattered when a stone was thrown, so she'd started to run like the others. Now safe behind the letterboxes, leaning against the half-beige, half-brown wall, she wipes her eyes and sniffles, calms down, glides onto the tiled steps in the foyer. What was the drop that made the cup overflow? She imagines in slow motion the smooth, slightly bulging surface that a single falling drop can deform, the impact, the concentric circles, the waves, and suddenly that's all it can take. The edginess swells the arteries, it spills over, reason escapes, slips away, calm men sweat, get worked up, get excited, and throw themselves out of the bowl where others want to drown them. Instinctively she knows, she guesses. In the bush too, tensions are increasing. There's this idea of independence in the air, an idea she understands without admitting it. A settler got himself shot on his property in Boulou-Paris, and they said it was a poacher. Around his place there's talk of political vengeance. And then there's the land occupied near Tio. People are running in one direction, then another, and suddenly a man, breathless, visibly exhausted, leans against the foyer's glass door that opens under his pressure. With one leap he's inside. Blood runs down his face, onto his beard, sticky. He meets the young woman's attentive gaze and thinks he's not risking anything. She's not the hysterical type who would scream, this girl who stares at him but does not move. She's not afraid. She's not speaking. The sort of chick who doesn't need beauty tricks just to exist. Her face smooth, no makeup, her hair tied back with an elastic band, sensible looking. He sees all that in 3 seconds. He keeps his right arm crossed over his chest. A grimace distorts his features when he moves. His hand hangs, broken. She waits. A mixture of composure and extreme attention. He's on the alert, worried. Protesters run past, followed closely by mobile police units. Shouts can be heard from various individuals coming up from Elmer Street. Truncheon blows rain down. Dull sounds just outside, yelling. Without a word, she guides him to the lift, presses the button for the top floor. As the door closes again, frighteningly slow, they hear the glass at the entrance shattering and mobile police rushing into the stairwell. With his good hand, the man slams the button that stops the lift cage between 2 floors, and under Malu's increasingly watchful eye. What am I doing here? She thinks, her head spinning. They hear a man yell, "Some of them are hiding in the lift." Someone kicks against the outer doors. She shouts loud and clear, "Yes, I'm stuck in here." She hears, "It's a woman." Then, "Are you alone?" She replies, her voice neutral, her eyes drilling his. "Yes." "You want some help?" "No, the concierge is looking after it, thanks." "Very well, come on, guys, we'll keep going. Don't be too worried, love. You're better off there than in the street." The sound of their footsteps fades as they descend the stairs. Drained of all strength, she slides along the wall and sits down in a corner on the worn coconut matting. A lock of hair shorter than the rest falls over her face. "Why are you doing this?" he asks. "I don't know. Mathilde always says that if you silence others, you impoverish yourself. Maybe it's the same thing. To not help you would be to impoverish myself." "Who is this Mathilde?" "My grandmother." "Ah." She takes a bandana from her bag. "I've only got this for your arm." He sits near her. "I can't see anything. Is my eye punctured?" Malu swallows. Delicately she tries to lift his eyelid, sealed shut by the dried blood. He thinks simultaneously, "I can see," and "she has cool hands." He breathes, relieved. "Can you see?" "Yes." "Oh, it's good then." In her expression, he recognized something indefinably local. "New Caledonian?" "Yes." She unties the manu he keeps round his neck and moves to wipe the wound. He stops her. "No, try to make me a sling so I can put my arm in it and keep your bandana." Another bandana floats, a red flash, beneath his closed eyelids. She doesn't react. "If you want." Up close he smells of sweat and dust, blood and smoke. "Funny, isn't it?" he says. "That we're stuck here, you and me, in this lift." "Unlucky, more like it." "Aren't you scared? That I'll hit you? That I'll attack you?" She hesitates, tries to understand what's making him utter these outrageous things, then responds, laconic. "No." "Why not?" "I haven't thought about it." "Anyway, you're in no state to do whatever you like." "You don't know who I am?" he says. She shrugs, visibly annoyed by this conversation that's going nowhere. He feels bad for provoking her, and yet, despite the pain, he continues. "I'm probably your enemy." "If you say so." Nothing can unnerve her. With care she ties the manu, very gently parting the woolly hair that grows long down the nape of his neck, joining up with a thick beard. She tightens the knots, close to kissing him, but does not bat an eyelid, does not blush, is not self-conscious, unmoved, indifferent. Finally he can rest his arm. "Is that better?" "Yes." He could have had girls like her in Paris. Flirts, girls hungry for exoticism, love-starved students, pretty girls, beautiful girls, ugly ones especially. But he had not given in, did not even want to know. Gave himself a hand job sometimes to forget the irrational longing, stained the sheets. Cursed grey eyes. Put all his hopes in the pure memory of a timid girl glimpsed behind a hedge of pigeon peas. Saw again her long shining braid, her lowered eyelids, her lips as violet as Java plum flesh, her broad hips. Was glad of the day when he had said to her family, "Yes, you can keep her for me," and kept himself for her. Thought of the children he would make in this mould, children he would have in full awareness of the continuation of his people, black children like him, sons for the fight, daughters for hope. Thanks for listening.
Hello, dear friends. My name is Shashi Martynova. I'm translating between English, Russian, and Irish. I'd like you to hear today a few poems by Yuri Smirnov, a Ukrainian poet, staying now in Ukraine with his daughter and his mother. We're looking for a publisher to publish Yuri's poems in English. Платочек. Когда мы возвращаемся из укрытия в живой еще дом, я остаюсь на крыльце и слушаю, как затухает сирена воздушной тревоги. Их несколько. Они отключаются разновременно, словно бы из септаккорда органист убирает звук за звуком. Последняя как будто захлебывается собственным кашлем, как пожилой театрал в партере, прижимая к губам бело-серый платочек, видавший лучшие виды и времена. Handkerchief. When we are back from the shelter to the house that's still alive, I stay on the porch and listen to the air raid siren fading away. There are several of them. They switch off in asynchrony, like some organists taking away from a seventh chord one sound after another. The last one seems like it's smothered with its own cough, like an elderly theatre-goer in the stalls, mopping his lips with a whitish-grey handkerchief that had seen better views, better times. The 8th. On the day of Bach's birth, I lie motionless, and I watch Sviatoslav Teofilovich Richter playing the 8th sonata by Mozart in London. Here he comes out, like Marshal Zhukov comes out to the order. Here he bows, curtly and unequivocally, like a judge satisfied with the ruling and the choice of an executioner. By the way, Richter's father was shot dead by our bunch 10 days before they surrendered Odessa to Germans, which didn't stop Richter from being one of our bunch, even though he is 3/4 German and 1/4 the Soviet marshal of those keys. The lights are fading. The interrogator's lamp is glaring Mozart in the face. The 8th sonata sounds to me like some counter-revolutionary organization. Richter's fingers, they're not flying, not running. It seems like his hands are shaking, as if he is having a fit, as if in convulsion. And Mozart, 3/4 German, 1/4 wine from the taverns of Vienna, buried in some pauper's pit, just like Richter's father, in the plotting of his sonatas is shrewd. Here the music slowly rises skywards, and here are the goosebumps of joy thrilling the public. Mozart was one shrewd beadle. Richter receives the communion. For him, those speedy stretches show sonatas crises, the crisis of Genesis, and so he goes through them even faster, et andante cantabile though. The hands are falling into the form of keys, as on the shoulders of a prodigal son returned. What was born on the day of mother's death, in the placenta's lava hitting right from the sky, Richter plays it with the hands of his dead. He shouts in horror with his motionless face, with the firing slit of a Gwynplaine remodeled. God whispers to that baby boy of 70 years, "Courage, my dear, don't you give up. I'll walk you out of Russian captivity. Just do that and go wherever you want, even to that Chopin of yours." Cuba. The spring tries in vain to explode with warmth, as an aircraft repair plant explodes, hit by caliber. When we win, I'll come out to the porch with a little jar of Cuba Libre. I will read something nice of hobbits and the rain, or maybe of Chunya the Dachshund, or maybe even some meaningless story of zombies, and I will feel how the hollow hole under my glassy heart hides that mortal cold. Airmen and sailors. My niece behind the wall practices her pianoforte. To prance she trains her fingers. So far the success is meager. She repeatedly stumbles and lingers. After every third stumble, she snaps and she pummels the keys and totally quits all music. But then she re-enters. Behind the window some alien airman brings in haste his new presents of death to some towns. Every time he is back, the girl loses her track, and when his sound is gone, her fingers again can don their flighty boldness. I am writing a movie script, some whodunit. On the scale of evil, my archvillain is at the unhappy beginning. Everyone at the airbase is dead serious. Why bother writing those movie scripts and training those fingers to prance? Before their death, sailors don their clean dress. If you're spared come evening, go dance. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Izidora Angel. I'm a writer and translator from Bulgarian, and I want to read to you something that was recently published in Firmament, and it's a short story by the writer Yurdanka Bereva called Family Portrait of the Black Earth. After the surgeons removed my grandmother's breast, she began to cup her hands over the bare spot, the way you'd hide a physical discomfort. Baba's cupped hand, which I'd known both as a den of endearment and as a unit of time, was now also the dome of a church, a demolished church. We stood before the ruins and made out the details in the frescoes, the doctor's late diagnosis, our belated prayers. The village woman came by to visit and check on her, to see how she was feeling. Pain and suffering are strange tourist attractions. In some places around the world, large-scale tragedies have their price of admission. Houses where for years someone got held and tortured, schools where mass shootings took place, stretches of road along train wreckages. Baba's wound was free and open to the public. Sometimes she'd tell her visiting girlfriends that the only thing that hurt was her missing breast, but none of them could wrap their heads around how a piece of flesh long severed from the body could hurt. A few times Baba sent my grandfather over to the hospital to retrieve her breast so they could bury it in the garden. It was a good garden. It had yielded good harvests for years. But this wasn't an organ to be planted. The only thing it was good for was a lab culture. Diallo pretended he'd gone to see the doctors as my grandmother had asked him. Once he came back and lied that they wouldn't release the breast without special paperwork. Other times he claimed they'd missed some sort of deadline. But he could only beat around the bush for so long, and one day he came home with something from the butcher. He unwrapped it and pounded this delicacy methodically, therapeutically, until he became rawer than the raw meat. But the therapy hadn't worked. For someone on the outside looking in, Diallo must have looked like a diligent farmer prepping his winter provisions. Curing sausage, for instance, was also best done over the smoke of a smoldering fire. Diallo kept the meat away from the cats and from Baba until it shriveled enough to resemble the corpse of a breast. Baba and Diallo dug a shallow hole close to the grave of Karaman the dog. Afterward, they interred the breast corpse and covered the hole. They did not stand on ceremony. For my grandmother, it was important that she be reunited with all her body parts. She believed she could not leave the earthly realm had a part of her body been mislaid. For my grandfather, it was important to fulfill her final wish to be whole. She outlived her breast by 8 years. We covered a lot of ground during that time. We attempted to act as though nothing had happened. It's what you might call a conversational camouflage. Even so, the disguise that materialized every time. A sudden question on whether I recalled the name of that one song about the severed head of the partisan fighter Velopeva. What if Diallo had brought her another woman's breast by mistake, and that woman was now desperately searching for it somewhere? For the millionth time, to look closely at her, see how on the left side her body was that of a young girl, and on the right, that of a decrepit old woman. Our conversations took on that same asymmetry. To the left, an echo, to the right, a silence. She never visited the breast burial site, and like all neglected graves, this one quickly weeded over. Once, Baba told me how she diligently tended to her garden her entire life. She weeded from dawn till dusk because weeds were like cancer. They swiftly stifled the good plants and suffocated them. She ought to have tended to her health as she tended to her garden, she said. Be a good gardener, she told me. I wonder sometimes whether keeping silent on what we'd really buried in the garden was the right thing to do. I saw something on the news once about 2 cousins who tried to rig the lottery by leaving their number picks off the original ticket and waiting to write in the winning numbers on their carbon copy, only after they'd seen the results called on TV. They'd forgotten that the winning ticket could only be authenticated by matching all the tear-offs to the original. Diallo was a good criminal, I thought. He had switched out Baba's torn-off piece so well, she felt like a winner even in her biggest loss. But that's not to say this is a hopeful story. I'm not fond of hopeful platitudes, especially ones about cups that are half full. Maybe it's because I've seen what an empty brasserie looks like. At home, empty bras are archaeological finds from a long ago dried up Milky Way. Elsewhere, they are testimonials to the soft landing of motherhood. Flags, signaling the capitulation of childhood. All empty brasseries are unhappy. Something is left, somebody has followed. We've yet to invent replacement padding to even out the heart's losses and keep them artificially half full. A strange plant is shooting up from the ground near where we buried the rotted meat. If I like it, I'll call it Baba's Lullaby. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Kareem James Abu-Zeid. I am a freelance translator of Arabic, French, and German. Most of the literature I've translated has been Arabic, but today I'll be sharing from a French language project with you, and more specifically, the poetry of Olivia Elias. Let me tell you a little bit about Olivia before I start reading. Olivia was born in Haifa in 1944, and she's a poet of the Palestinian diaspora who writes in French. In 1948, her family was exiled to Lebanon, where she lived until she was 16 years old. And currently, she splits her time between Paris and Arles, France. She published her first collection of poetry in 2015. Her third and most recent collection, Chaos Traversé, which translates to Chaos Crossing in English, was published in France in 2019. And that book, Chaos Crossing, has just come out in my English translation with World Poetry Books. It was published on November 15, 2022. Olivia's work has been published in numerous journals and anthologies, and it's been translated into, in addition to English, Arabic, Spanish, Italian, and Japanese. As you'll see, Olivia Elias's poetry is characterized by very terse, laconic language, strong rhythms, and a deep sensitivity to the Palestinian cause, the plight of refugees, and human suffering in general. So, now, without any further ado, I'm going to be reading a few of Olivia's poems. I will begin by reading the first poem in French as well, and then the English translation, and with the others I'll just read the English. So this first poem, again from the book Chaos Crossing, is called The Sea to Drink, La mer à boire. Le monde était une vaste énigme, elle ne le savait pas, et ignorait qu'elle ne le savait pas. Les grands avaient bâillonné les mots, elle s'enfuit donc, il lui restait encore la mer à boire, avant d'atteindre l'autre rive. The sea to drink. The world was a vast enigma, but she didn't know it, and wasn't aware that she didn't know it. The grown-ups had gagged the words, so she escaped. She still had the sea to drink before she could reach the other shore. This next poem is called Sacrifice. And again, I'll just be reading the English from here on out. Sacrifice. Why should I have to pay the price of sacrifice, asks the child of the people of peasants, fedayeen, and merchants, who never dreamed of sleeping away from his home, impervious to the call of the open sea. A life in its own shadow, held at gunpoint by snipers and 20-year-old kids with death as their harness, while the men in sidelocks and the believers in the return of God the Son crucified on the cross go on chanting. This next poem is called Call. Call. 18 years old, the sea for horizon, for so long dreaming of unfurling his foliage, taking stock of his steps, and just as the earth cannot contain the sap each spring, the call keeps growing. 18 years old, the sea for horizon, finally to obey the command, roll the dice, and cross the liquid wall. This next poem is called Barca Nostra, Our Boat. Barca Nostra, 19 December 2019. And I should say that it references the wreckage of a migrant ship that sank in the Mediterranean. Barca Nostra. Their report cards pinned to their chests will not have saved them, pathetic passports barely good enough for paper balls. Loaded dice, error message, this world is not their home, the white border closed to the children of the rusty trawler. The words are absent, only want to pray and bow down before the fallen children in the field of honor of the struggle for a good life. Their report cards pinned to their chests, posthumous decorations, night after night in the Mediterranean Sea, in the middle of a tablecloth of paper funeral flowers, a boat wanders off course and sinks. This world is not their home. Forever close the white border. This next poem is called Mediterranean One. The promise of the other shore contained in your name grows more distant each day. Your midday is fading before terrain. I've been dolphin in your waters. I recall the sun was at its zenith, and I was running, jumping on the pier. There was only me, the sun at its zenith, me and the blue immensity. A scientific approach. The adieus, goodbyes, see you soons, they're not for me. Don't know what will happen once the gates walked through and closes again. Some were away a few days and never could see the orange trees, their mothers again. Suddenly declared aliens on their own land. Some fell asleep and never woke up. Look, for those who were asleep their whole lives, it doesn't make much difference. Better, therefore, to take a scientific approach and remain vigilant. I'll read two more poems. This one is called Lightening. Lightening. In the beginning, everything went without saying, just like that. Then it all became so muddled. Today, the complications. It's over now, for me. I no longer have time for the muddy jousting, for all the oaths eternal. Whatever will come, will be. It's well known that appearances are misleading. I don't walk any slower. Quite the contrary, now that on the way back to childhood I drop the stones weighing down my pockets one by one, relieved of the fear of losing even myself. Now is the time for lightening. And I'll read one last poem. It's called Such Slow Birth. And it references the Book of the Way and its virtue, which is also known as the Tao Te Ching. Such slow birth. 2 cycles intersect. Cycle of twilight deepening toward the black moon. Cycle of transformations ripening. I opened the book of the way and its virtue. To attain complete emptiness is to settle firmly in rest. As a child, I had this knowledge and didn't know how precious it was, handed down by village elders, sitting on their doorsteps, surrounded by beauty they offered, their faces like old cats in the sun. Time now to drag my chair out in front of the door. Thank you very much for listening. And again, the book is Chaos Crossing by Olivia Elias, published by World Poetry Books in November of 2022. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jill, also Suzanne Jill Levine. Anyway, I'm here because Larissa has very kindly invited me to read some texts of mine for you. So here we go. I'll read a poem which I translated from a little chapbook I did of a Nicaraguan poet, Pedro Solis. He wrote these poems actually to his wife, who had been diagnosed as bipolar. And this poem is called Don't Go Down There. Don't go down there. Let your mind sail on with its deep fretwork. Don't let the murky abyss of harsh humors undermine your head. Don't sink into the absence that obsesses you and sways you in that war against yourself. Look in the dark at the shiny mirror, I insist, at your side. Like a soldier set to find another fallen man wounded in battle. Rediscover my voice, muted to the level of your decline. Let me keep you company in that labyrinth of mist. Let's see if there's another one here that I might want to read. It's kind of a nice one. I bring you words. I know, my dear, that you feel beaten down. This is why I bring you a blue word like the ivy of incense rising from the heater, a green word like the mossy foliage that gives life to the boulder, a word red like resin but more fragile like a blush. I made the word indifference kiss the leper. Others hate betrayal. I piled together with the word ash. Some, like oppression and poverty, I put together with a burning word, words that burn us by making us tremble with apprehension, usury, wall, dictatorship. I also gathered for you, my dear, words to make you smile, caress, flowers, music. I placed them like buds in your lap to watch them beat the air like colorful butterflies. I'd like to now read a piece that's an anecdote from my life, very small one. This is part of a book I'm writing of personal essays and sort of vignettes or anecdotes. So this is called Susan in Person. When I first met Susan Sontag, she was sitting against a window, lounging really, with her long legs resting casually on the windowsill. I thought her very striking in her classic black turtleneck and pants, her thick black hair with a white raccoon streak. I was too intimidated to approach her, but finally did when she glided over to the table covered with tempting bagels and lox and salads. This was 1977, and we were at a fiction collective brunch party in Marc Mirsky's then East Village pad where he and his Norwegian wife Inger, they were editors of fiction magazine, were celebrating their marriage. It was one of those walk-up apartments where the bathtub was in the kitchen, and when I greeted her, postponing my desire to prepare my bagel, lox, onions, and cream cheese, the first thing she said to me, the main thing she knew of me, I guessed, was that I was Manuel Puig's translator, was a question. Is Puig queer? She was already famous, unless her interlocutor was her equal in aggressive chutzpah, for leaving her hapless interlocutor, in this case myself, speechless. I think I only managed to reply blandly, of course, with a weak smile, but she was obviously awaiting a wittier comeback, maybe, from a translator of great writers such as myself. What stopped me short, or at least tied my tongue, was 1, wasn't she queer? 2, how could she not know that he was gay? But even more so, she didn't ask if he were gay, but rather if he were queer, which at that time was not fashionable as it became later on. In the late 1970s, it was still a derogatory term, though more polite, of course, than fag. This was, I later thought, clearly a moment of Sontag's talent as a trendsetter. At that very moment, I was convinced later, she was reinventing the term queer as a radical, gender, cool, and intellectual category. And of course, the world would soon follow suit. Okay. So those are the few texts I have. I just wanted to give you a few minutes, but I may come back for more, but in any case, let us rejoice with words. Thank you so much. Hi, this is Jill again, and I'd like to bring you part 2 of my reading, which is essentially going to be translations of women poets that I've worked with, and I've worked with a number. One text will be the first text by Marjorie Agosin from Chile. She's writing a series of texts about the sea. And then the other will be a few poems that came out in Reversible Monuments, which is an anthology of contemporary Mexican poetry. And these are poems by Coral Bracho that I did quite a while ago. Wonderful poet. There's sort of like an organic sensuality to her poems. I'd say it's almost like they're love poems to everything, but very sensual. Probably she's talking about sex a lot, but which if you met her, it wouldn't be your first thought. She seemed like a rather very introverted person. Anyway, at least from what I remember. Okay, so here's the text by Marjorie Agosin, about the sea. For me, exile lasted longer than it should have. Days and months turned into years during which I got used to living in another language and far from those who were the memories of my family. Sometimes at night, when I'd feel the surge of anxiety, I would look toward the sea, and from my grandparents' balcony, from the memory of this beloved balcony, my fingers would slide over the damp sand as if the paper on those walls that surrounded me were the waves from my childhood. I would imagine the sea from a distance, the Pacific, the ocean that carried my great-grandparents around Cape Horn toward Valparaiso, the same that brought me and my brothers and sisters from New York, braided with our memories and crossings, the same sea that has seen the passage of history and that has signified refuge to those who continue to cross it. Marjorie Agosin, thank you. And Here are some poems, as I said, from the works of Coral Bracho, Mexican poet. Her poems tend to be quite long, so I'm reading some of the shorter ones. This is called in Spanish, Desde esta luz, From this light. From this light into which, with delicate flame, eternity falls. From this attentive garden, from these shadows, opens a threshold to time, in which objects become magnetic, plunging into what holds and offers them up, clear, rounded, generous, fresh and filled with their joyous volume, their festive splendor, their star-like depths. Solid and diverse, they fuse their space with their moment, their precise orchard to be sensed, like clear-cut stones in a garden, like intervals traced upon a temple. A door, a chair, the sea, the profound unbound whiteness of the wall. Brief lines center it. The tamarind trees leave a brilliance inside the thick night. A decanter releases the solar sound of water. And the firm warmth of his hands, the dense night, the vast night flowing over the deep stream, leaves behind its endearing warmth. Okay, here's another one coming up. Okay. Upon it they gently reflect. In the mirror of time, consciousness flickers. Fine serpent of glass, it surrounds things, enfolding, creating, pinning them down. It sees itself looking at its reflection, sees its image looking. Its movements become cautious and slow, leaving crevices in its discourse, whose design the crevices trace as they shine, replacing movement. Their arabesques subdue the haunches of the sea, in whom silence breathes. Time is a mirror beneath the blue. Upon it they reason with their fine little stings. Upon it they gently reflect. Okay, now a couple of more even, let me see, a couple more, or is it one more? I think one more. I can find it. Okay, here's, here's one I'll read called Piedra en la arena, Stone in the Sand. Two play with a stone that emanates light. They caress its smooth surface, dense on the white sand. They contemplate, cover it. They gently make it turn. Suddenly, one of them grabs it, throws it away. They look for it again. The pleasurable anxiety they feel looking at it again bursts forth. Once more it must be found. The one who thrusts it away always welcomes it back, shouting. The other already looks upon it as if it no longer existed. Okay, well, I'll do maybe just one more, which is Una piedra en el agua de la cordura, a stone in the water of sanity. A stone in the water of sanity plummets into the latitudes, holding us between perfect circles. At the bottom, the thread of sanity hangs in the shadows between this and that point, between this point and that if you swing over its rhombi, you will see space multiply. Beneath the brief arch of sanity, you will see dead, even clear-cut gestures if then you get off and sit still and see yourself swaying. Okay, well, thank you again for your patience, and ever onward to Jill. Ciao.